kid was cut in half, aren't it?
She's just when you thought it was safe to
Stalking her.
Hey, I was checking out the joint down the street, but all they want is mud wrestlers.
Mud wrestlers? Shit!
Yeah, but they're packing them in.
Dearest Erik, things are really bumming out. It'd be great for you, Erik.
Forget it, Joy Boy.
Most of the girls do it, you know. Do it. Change their names, of course. Mine's Dolly.
There, who's in here? Who's there, God damn you!
Hi, this is Tony O'Dell from Chopping Mall, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
Welcome back to The Hysteria Continues, and this time we're going to New York City via Toronto for an American Nightmare. A pretty obscure slasher movie from the Cash for Slash tax shelter Canadian horror movies, the early 1980s, produced by Paul Lynch, of course famous for Prom Night and less so for Humongous perhaps. But yes, that is our main film of the week. And Erik, this film has a character called Erik, so I had a little fun with it.
Yep, I noticed some of the little digs at me you included in the little montage at the start there.
It wasn't a dig, Erik, it was a tribute.
Yeah, never a tribute from you.
So, and Nathan, have you ever had an American nightmare?
Well, I live in America, so I'm sure I've had nightmares before.
Yes. Well, we shall see if this is one of the nightmares. I don't know if you've presumably you haven't woken up topless in a motel room with someone with rubber gloves on.
No. Somebody that I talk to a ton and they never reply. No.
Okay. Well, Joseph, how about you? What's your American nightmare?
This show.
Very good.
Well, this is a trans-global nightmare, surely.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the American side, I'm having to endure a nightmare, so we'll just say that.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Anyway, we'll have a rollicking good time with this, even without the booze. So, American Nightmare is coming up. It's going to be our my main pick, actually. It's a film that I guess it's kind of, unless you're kind of really into your slashers, a lot of people, it's one to pass them by because it's fairly obscure. But, I'm going to have fun talking about that, hopefully. But before we do that, let's talk about what we've been watching recently. So, Erik, have you got anything you want to tell us about?
I have nothing.
Well, it's going to be a short show, unlike the Drunkcast, which did tip over into 2 hours. So I think we got some time banked. But Joseph, how about you? Anything you want to tell us about?
Yeah, the only thing I watched was the first episode of the Dexter kind of reboot thing they have going on. Basically, what they're trying to do is rewrite the ship, as it were. A lot of fans weren't happy with the way the series ended, so they've got the original showrunners back to kind of, steer the ship in the right direction and give the character the proper send-off that he deserves. So,
is it kind of like a Bobby Ewing coming out the shower kind of scenario?
No, I mean, because they're not like retroactively neglecting anything that happened. Everything that happened still happened. But they're just kind of, I guess they're extending the character beyond where he was left, just so he can have proper closure. And so far, I mean, there's no real surprises. It's off to a good start. It's more cinematic. This time around, there's only going to be 10 episodes. So, I always liked Dexter. Even at its worst, it was still a very entertaining show. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going with this. Anyone else catch this?
Not yet. No.
Not yet.
Well, I know Erik wouldn't because he never watches TV shows. So.
No, I don't have the attention span.
I know that.
Sorry, what?
Oh, Erik.
Aww.
Anything else you want to tell us about?
No, that's it for this week.
Okay, right. Well, we're rollicking through this. So, Nathan, how about you?
I'm afraid I have not watched much either. I did watch Scream 1981 last night, but we've already covered it.
Were you having trouble sleeping?
I can't believe anyone would watch that film. Oh, I'm blocking you, Nathan, because I only want people in my life who don't like Scream.
Only, yes. No, I wasn't having trouble sleeping. I just find it very atmospheric.
It is, and I think I like Scream 1981, Justin.
Yeah, to be fair, I haven't watched it for a while, so Maybe I'll revisit it one day, but not for a while, I expect. So, okay. Well, anything else, Nathan?
No, that's unfortunately that's it.
Okay, well, fair enough. To be honest, for me as well, it's been a busy week. We've had people over, so been going out quite a lot. But I did finish the series or season 3 of You, which I quite enjoyed. I'm not sure they've already announced season 4, haven't they? You kind of get to a point, don't you? Sometimes with shows, it's a bit like The Walking Dead. I'm kind of just feel like I've got to get to the bitter end, even though I can only half watching it. But I did enjoy. I thought the end of season 3 really picked up. The last couple of episodes were much more fun. It felt like they were kind of we were talking earlier, maybe it was off air when we were sort of saying about how sometimes you can fill airtime by going that Little Britain Barbara Cartland thing by going la 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 la. It just felt like they were doing that with a few of the episodes of You, and so much they were just kind of stretching it to 10 episodes when it could have easily been 6 or 8. What did you think, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, I really did like that run of last episodes. And for me, it feels like, I mean, you have to take into consideration that the show is extremely popular with Netflix, so they're probably going to try to milk it for all it's worth. But even with this ending to season 3, it feels like they know there's not really anywhere else they can take the Joe Goldberg character. So that it feels like they're kind of setting up his ending, as it were. So I'm hoping they actually do that and give it some kind of, creative integrity. But, knowing the, how much money they can make off it, they'll probably, go into 5 and season 6 and beyond, honestly.
I guess it also depends on how many books are written.
Yeah, well, I can't remember how many there are. There are like 3 or 4. But to my knowledge, season 3 has gone completely away from the storytelling in the books. So I imagine that's what they're going to do with season 4 as well.
Okay. Right. Anyway, if you haven't seen You, I'm just going to be I'll be looking out for some things to watch. One film I do really want to catch up with, it's been getting some really good reviews, is One Night in Soho.
Yeah, I'm hearing it's like a kind of like a time travel giallo almost. So I really want to see this.
And I've heard it's got a really good soundtrack as well.
What, Toya and Kajagoogoo?
No, it's actually got Susie and the Banshees are on the soundtrack, Erik.
No, they're not.
They are.
Are they? What dreadful concoction have they contributed?
Happy House.
Really?
It's on the trailer. If you watch the trailer.
It's not a happy house at the Thrillfall residence right now.
No, it's certainly not. Unhappy House.
I'm trying to think of what films that Toya, and they've used Toya songs for.
Jubilee and what was the other one around this? Quadrophenia. She's probably on the soundtrack to that, I think.
Didn't they do that, Homes Under the Hammer? I think they had one of a clip of her songs on that.
Yeah, well, Susie's song probably wasn't on Homes Under the Hammer. So there.
Oh, Erik. Goodness sake. Anyway, talking of blockbuster films like, well, not blockbuster, but sort of well-known films like One Night in Soho, then we'll now go back to American Nightmare, and a film that is relatively obscure, but I'm going to play the trailer for you now. It's only a minute long, but it's one of those trailers with lots of bits of muffled bits and incidental music. But anyway, here is the trailer that I found for American Nightmare.
Every year, girls move to the city, determined to make their dreams come true, or die trying. American Nightmare. Pray you never have one.
A man investigates the disappearance of his sister with the help of a roommate. He uncovers a trail of prostitution, incest, blackmail, and murder. And that's a very short synopsis from IMDb of this Paul Lynch produced kind of slasher movie. I kind of get it is a slasher movie, definitely, but it's quite often it's been described as an American giallo, or to more correctly, a Canadian pretending to be American giallo. Although when I saw an interview with the screenwriter, he said that he didn't even know what a giallo was, John Shepherd. But funnily enough, he got a writing gig in Italy to write a Italian thriller, presumably a giallo, off the back of this movie. So, but anyway, American Nightmare. It's pretty easy to guess this isn't an American movie. I mean, certainly around this time in the early 1980s, the cash for slash, a lot of the Canadian low-budget filmmakers were making movies with an eye on the American market. I mean, Happy Birthday to Me, for instance, obviously is meant to be set in the United States. But of course, this one tips its hat almost immediately. So when it opens with the Pan-Canadian or Pan-Canada logo, which kind of tips its hat that this certainly isn't an American Nightmare. But it's one of the, for people who've seen it, it's kind of it's a mixed bag, in so much that for me it feels more like an attempt to do a kind of a Don't Answer the Phone style movie. Because, you know, I mean, if you're a fan of low budget slasher movies from the early 1980s, and I'm sure you are if you're listening to this, you kind of know that there was this kind of like half and half. You had half kind of your popcorn slashers like Prom Night, Hell Night, all those kind of movies, and then you had on the flip side, you had more the grindhouse route with films like Don't Go Into the House, Don't Answer the Phone, the more kind of grimy, kind of sleazier side of movies. And this feels like it falls into that latter side, but paradoxically it actually has a really fun cast, and actually it's quite progressive in a lot of ways. That I remember when I first watched this, that I mean, homosexuality was barely featured at all in early 80s slasher movies. I mean, you just didn't get any gay characters, and if you did, they certainly weren't portrayed in any major way, or certainly weren't portrayed in any kind of positive way. But in this movie you have a kind of transvestite or maybe transsexual prostitute called Dolly, who, spoiler alert, does die, but is treated throughout by most of the characters in just a very normal kind of way. There's no big deal made out of you know, what they wear, and it felt very progressive for a movie of this time. And also, I like the writing. The characters are very likable. And you've got this kind of more of a thriller kind of, basically this character Erik, who goes to find out what's happened to his sister, who we see being murdered in a hotel room in the opening 5 minutes by an unseen assailant, and the unseen assailant starts working their way through this kind of rooming house, which seems to be just populated only by strippers, prostitutes, or sex workers, and Dolly, and is kind of murdering his way through all of those throughout the movie. And he teams up with one a stripper, and they go trying to find out what happened to his sister. And it's, for me, it's again, it's the thing that tips its hat to being a Canadian movie. It feels very Canadian in a lot of ways, but also it's very chilly. It has a kind of feel of almost like a David Cronenberg movie. So those kind of films like Rabid, the early David Cronenberg movies that were shot, you know, in Canada, and they have that kind of slightly, not exactly dystopian, but that kind of that chilly feel to them, which was missing from many of the films from the United States. And unsurprisingly, I mean, this film was shot in the depth of winter of December of 1981. So even though it has the 1983 timestamp on it, it actually comes from the hallowed year of 1981. And it's, for me, it seems like a strange choice, given that the kind of films that seem to be popular in 81, although I suppose by December of 1981, the genre had arguably burnt out with like the box office relative failures of things like My Bloody Valentine and The Burning, and those films, and Hell Night, which hadn't exactly set the box office alight. So maybe they were looking for a film that was more seriously minded and more thriller based, perhaps. But it certainly doesn't stint on the sleaze. I mean, it has a very icky kind of incest subplot, and the ending of the movie, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is one of the most disturbing of, or the motivation anyway for the murders, one of the most disturbing ones out of all of early 80s slasher movies. Lots of nudity, exclusively female nudity, and a general kind of everything's very grimy. If you're a fan of those 42nd Times Square kind of 42nd Street Times Square, those kind of the peep shows and the porno shops and all those kind of things, they've kind of it definitely has that feel to it. So I mean, overall it's a film that I find is a kind of a bit of a mishmash in so much that I really like the characters. I think it's quite witty, it's quite funny in places, but it's also very dark in other places. Sometimes it drags, but actually some of the suspense sequences are pretty good, especially Leonore Zan, who of course was in Happy Birthday to Me and Visiting Hours around this same time, being menaced in the sort of darkened nightclub with the kind of whispered, I think we heard it in the trailer when you hear her name being whispered by the killer, which is very reminiscent of Prom Night and the killer speaking down the phone. But overall, I think it's a film that I've seen very mixed views on across the interwebs. So I'll be interested to see what you guys think of it. So starting with you, Nathan, what are your thoughts on American Nightmare?
I had seen American Nightmare a long time ago, but I didn't remember anything about it. So as I rewatched it this time, I was kind of surprised at how much I was enjoying it. It's got some very effective, like, stalking sequences. There's the one where Louise is kind of hiding behind these television sets, and it kind of reminded me of Black Christmas because she looks up at one point and the killer's like staring at her, and she like pushes the TVs onto him and runs. But I'm like, I think she made for a really good final girl. She has a great chase scene at the end. And I loved her relationship with Erik, because they do end up together. But, at first, I like how she's no nonsense about what she does. Like, like she's a stripper, but like it doesn't define her. And like the characters, I think, are very fleshed out. Like Lenore Zan as Tina, like she has a good scene with her boyfriend where he's trying to get her to quit stripping, but she's just like, this is the only business I know. And so, I mean, you kind of do develop, caring about the characters. I felt bad, like, especially for Lenore Zan's character, because that was pretty scary too, with like the whispering in the darkness, whispering her name. Kind of reminded me of Nightmare on Elm Street, where Freddy's whispering Tina's name. And she didn't go empty-handed. She took a weapon with her, a pitchfork, which I was like, that's an interesting choice of a defense weapon, is the pitchfork. I did not guess the killer correctly. I had absolutely no clue who the killer was. I will say that there was one character that I thought it could be, only because he always seems to play villains, but I was completely off base. It was interesting to see Alexandra Paul in the opening scene. But again, like I said before, I never understand why, when people are with the killer and they just keep talking and talking, sort of like Annie on Friday the 13th, and the killer never responds. Like, why don't they find that odd? I'd be like, you can't talk. But anyway, I'm with you. I thought that it was cool that they had this character, Dolly, and everybody treats Dolly just, like normal. Like, it's not a big deal at all, that she's a transgender or transvestite, whichever one it is. I liked that, she kind of treated, respectfully by the other cast members. Especially the girls. I felt like the razor death scene seemed pretty painful. The one where he's drowning one of the women in the bathtub, and I think she fakes being dead, but then he goes and like slices her wrists, and so then she starts screaming again. I thought that was kind of, just like cruel. But I guess he wanted to make sure she was dead, so there's that. But overall, yes, I enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to. and I think it's got some very effective, like, scary sequences. So I really feel like it deserves to be more well known than it is. So I think it's a great pick, and I had a good time watching it, Justin.
Excellent. Okay, we're glad to hear it. Thank you, Nathan. Joseph, how about you?
Yeah, like Nathan, I was watching American Nightmare, and I know I'd seen it before because I remember having like 3 or 4 copies on VHS, but I remembered nothing. So as the film progressed, it was like, a new experience for me. One thing I want to say right off the bat is that with American Nightmare and a lot of films like it in that kind of sleazerama kind of pantheon of grime, your maniacs and your don't go in the houses, I find myself kind of falling in love with them nowadays in a way not necessarily attributed to their sleaze, but rather I think each, American Nightmare included, are kind of wonderful time capsules of that particular time period of, seedy city streets and those shops and flop houses. And American Nightmare's use of this conceit, along with the abundance of drab colors, the beiges, my God, the beiges, they're I love stuff. I love that stuff so much that even if the movie were dull, and I concede that it isn't, it would most likely still get a passing grade for me. The story, I think, is it really kind of reminded me of a Nothing Underneath, with a missing woman and her brother in charge of locating her, dead or alive. In this sort of in this sort of kind of seedy underbelly, I thought, intentional or not, it was interesting considering how much we've discussed Nothing Underneath recently. But American Nightmare, I think, it is indeed sleazy to the point of almost making the viewer lose their lunch with a few of the late in the game revelations dealing with incest. And like I said, everything is kind of Skid Row at its finest. The visuals, the characters, even the altruistic brother piano player. He feels like he skirts the thin line at times. So yeah, it's skeezy and not exactly popcorny, but with it also kind of being a perfunctory whodunit. It kind of is kind of popcorny at the same time. So yeah, a thumbs up for me. I enjoyed this one. I'm not sure if I would ever go back and watch it again because it's, I don't know. I just feel like it's not quite on that level of like Maniac or Don't Go in the House, but I did have a good time with it. So yeah, good pick.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Joseph. I just before I come to Eric, one thing that just occurred to me was because I think it was shot on 16mm, so it has that kind of grimy, low budget feel to it. And I think from everything you said, I think if it had been a kind of a more sort of polished affair with a bigger budget, it may not have felt as authentic, which of course is ironic given the fact that it's pretending to be New York City and it's actually Toronto. But that sort of low budget skeevy kind of but charming feel, I think it kind of lends itself to this movie. So Eric, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have this one on DVD. It was released by Scorpion in 2012, I think. So yeah, it's one of those slasher movies where, for me, the peripheral characters are far more interesting and likable than the main kind of hero of the film. Although I do love the fact that the hero is called Erik, because it does evoke images of just rugged handsomeness and manliness and bravery. So there should be more heroes called Erik in movies, I think. Possibly killing... and villains called Erik would be great as well if they kill people called Justin and Susie.
You've got that. You had the Phantom of the Mall, didn't you? The horribly disfigured one.
Yes, well, watch out, because Erik will get his revenge on you and all your goth friends. Yeah, so the DVD for this isn't exactly a pristine remaster. It's full frame. It's quite dark. As you said, Justin, it was filmed in 16mm, and so, I mean, it's a very watchable print, but it's not exactly pristine presentation. Gives it a real grindhouse feel, as you were saying. The subdued images and the grainy visuals, it feels like something that would have been released on the Something Weird label or something like that, I thought. Interesting to see Lieutenant Stephanie Holden from Baywatch in that opening scene, topless, and saying some rather rude things to her client, who, as Nathan has said, doesn't speak back to her, which would be ringing alarm bells, yes, if I was her as well. So that really sets the tone from the movie. It's quite sleazy and has that real 42nd Street feel to it. I was saying earlier, I mean, how uninteresting the main character is. He's not uninteresting, but this is not unique to this film. Sometimes the main lead is kind of a straight man and gets less interesting things to do than some of the peripheral characters who can be a bit more playful and a bit more eccentric, and that's the case here. I mean, I love the characters of Louise, Dolly, and Tina, and I find them far more three-dimensional and engaging, and they have that, as you said, that strange family dynamic thing going on. That I'm trying to remember the film I mentioned this in before. I think it might have been Angel. When we were doing that on the Patreon feed, where kind of the people, who are making a living on the streets of, is that New York, have that kind of strange family bond that was really quite endearing and likable. Erik is the lead guy. He has to conduct the investigation and move the plot from A to B to C, and doesn't have really a huge amount else to do. And Michael Ironside is the same. I'm guessing possibly cast for marquee value, because I know he was a bit of a well-known actor at this stage in his career. He'd done Scanners, of course, which had been a sizable hit, I suppose, around the world. But again, he hasn't got a huge amount to do with the film. For me, the most impressive moments in American Nightmare are probably those suspense scenes, like when Nathan mentioned this, where is Louise? Yeah, she's being chased, and she's hiding behind that bank of televisions. So that was a great scene. Where that girl is taking a bath and there's somebody in the apartment and she doesn't realize it. I thought that was very well done as well. Tina creeping around the empty nightclub with her pitchfork. I thought that was a great sequence too. So it's littered with good sort of suspense sequences in it. And the sting in the tail, as you were mentioning, Justin, the sort of incest angle to the film, where we learn, the secret behind this videotape that people are after. It's very grim, I suppose is the word, but it kind of suits the tone of the film. The Giallo comparisons, I can completely see them. This is kind of a grindhousey version of a Giallo. The identity of the killer, I thought, like Nathan, was kind of well concealed, although I've read reviews where people have said that, the killer's identity is so obvious from the second he's on screen, and it makes me feel really stupid. And I'm not stupid, am I, Justin?
Well, I was just wondering, did you think it was a good move to make Erik a penis, playing the piano?
What? Oh, a pianist, yes. I was thinking, I said, okay, Erik is a pianist. I bet you Justin's going to have something clever to say about that. Yes, so, and the other actual Giallo thing, and this is a real weird thing, and I don't know if anyone's noticed this, there's lots of Giallo that end up on rooftops. The final scene is on a rooftop, and possibly maybe the killer falls off the roof, and that's how they're done in. And this one does the same. So that kind of reminded me of a Giallo as well. And I suppose that like a lot of the early 70s Giallo, there's not a lot of gore in this film. There's a hint of it here and there, but it's not exactly a Tom Savini fest, is it? It's still very good though, and all those suspense scenes I think work really well. It's got a good ending. It's got, as you said, it's got that cold, icy feel of early Cronenberg as well. So I thought it was really good. I mean, I've had this on Blu-ray, on DVD now for 10 years. I think I've watched it once in all that time up until this last week, and rewatching it, I was like, God, that's actually a pretty decent film. I really like it. So yeah, thumbs up from me as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Erik. It kind of reminds me of a film I wondered if it had taken a nod, the direction from was Paul Schrader's Hardcore with George C. Scott. His daughter's kind of disappeared into kind of the porno world, and he's traipsing around 42nd Street trying to find out what's happened to her. And it felt like it was aping that kind of feel, sort of going forward, which I thought was interesting. Also, the Giallo thing. It's funny that the writer said he didn't even know what a Giallo was, but the killer had the yellow latex gloves, which were the same gloves that the killer wore in Black Belly of the Tarantula. the kind of the giallo from the early mid 70s. So it was just interesting that kind of how sometimes people can read too much into something, and it's just sometimes it's just an accident, or it's kind of whatever, you know, that it makes the film take that kind of turn. Should we talk a little bit about some background? So Nathan, what do you have for us?
No.
Joseph, how about you?
Well, apart from describing the creepy cover from the 1984 VHS release from Media, I unfortunately have very little background on this. I can tell you that the back of said cover has some pretty spoilerific images from the film, and I can also tell you that Blockbuster Video's Guide to Movies gave the film 1.5 stars. 1.5 stars. Calling it a violent, nasty tale. They also gave American Ninja One Block Down the same rating, so what did they know?
I love American Ninja.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What do they know? That's all I have, really. I couldn't find much on this film.
It is obscure, but Erik, I know I've got the same DVD as you have.
Katrina's Nightmare Theatre, yes. Who is Katarina? I'm always wondering, is she something to do with wrestling or something?
I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, Katarina Lee Waters. She was on a lot of these Scorpion releases back in the day. Anyway, I digress. Well, Justin, I've got pages and pages of background here, but I know you've exactly the same, so I won't read it all out. So I'll just say that, of course, it stars Alexandra Paul, as we said, who was in Baywatch, but also she was in Christine, which was released the same year, but probably filmed later. And Lenore Zan, of course, was in Happy Birthday to Me and Visiting Hours, and her boyfriend was actually her real life boyfriend. Plays her boyfriend in the film, Paige Fletcher, and he was also in Humongous. But I didn't realize this, and we've probably mentioned it before, but he was the hitchhiker in the TV series The Hitchhiker, which was that anthology Twilight Zone type series of the mid 80s. So there we go. And I have like 4 pages of background as well, but I know you've got it all as well, Justin, so I'll let you read it out.
I don't know. I'm going to take one for the team. I'm going to let you go forward with that.
The film was filmed on film with a camera, and when it was shown in the cinemas, it had sound and things.
Thank you, Erik. I'll let you off. But I kind of, funny enough, because I saw that she was dating, the lead, Alexandra Paul was dating Lawrence Day, who played Erik. Nobody can resist an Erik. Exactly. Well, maybe, because I think when I was looking up, she must have been very young in this. She must have been 18, because she was born in 1963. So it was kind of, but anyway, I mean, it was quite, the amount of nudity was quite surprising, including everyone, Leonore Zan, and also the main woman whose name, what was her name? Laura Stalley, playing Louise. Pretty much every character apart from Dolly gets topless.
And we get to see Daddy's bottom. Well, is it Daddy's bottom? I'm not sure. It's probably a stunt double's bottom.
Well, I was thinking that was a bit of eye candy for you, wasn't it?
Yep.
Even though, given what...
whatever, yeah.
Yeah, no, we haven't said what the ending is, because obviously we will spoil it, and so if you haven't watched the film, then, of course, we always encourage you to watch the film before listening to this, and I believe it has come out on DVD. Some unscrupulous person, I'd obviously suggest never doing this, but I believe the film is on YouTube, so if you can't find it anywhere else. But yes, it turns out that... the Alexandra Paul's character has been sleeping. Well, the father has been sleeping with her. And it had been videotaped, and secretly, and to blackmail him, and that started off the string of murders. So I'm not sure if it was actually the only thing I wasn't too sure of whether it was the father who killed her or it was the killer, people who killed other people. Sorry, I can't remember his name now.
Yeah, I assume it was that guy who.
His name is Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think these people were going to ruin him somehow, and he just wanted to have, keep them from doing that because was he in love with the guy?
Well, he seemed to be very kind of enamored by Daddy, didn't he?
And of course, I think that the one thing we forgot to mention is that Daddy is in charge of this Goody Two Shoes kind of charity or something, is it? For children.
Yes, it's all very unsavory. But anyway, it's the early 80s and we love it. So, but the film was bizarrely, and I'm not sure why, it had a very strange shooting title, and the shooting title was Community Standards, which sounds very, very strange. I don't know why it was called that, and what would that even mean, do you think?
Don't incest your daughter.
Yeah.
A very strange kind of title for a film like this, Community Standards. It's I don't know. Anyway, maybe it was shot under that title just as a working title, but it was. I found some Canadian film magazines from the early 1980s, and it had said that it was filmed in Toronto on a budget of $200,000. And it actually went over $70,000 over budget. So it was actually originally budgeted at $130,000, which presumably, I'm not sure if that's a Canadian dollars. What is the difference between a Canadian dollar and a US dollar in value?
Right now? Oh, God.
Well, it was a cheap film anyway compared to sort of Prom Night. I mean, none of the films that were made in the Canadian tax shelter sort of times were particularly big budget, although films like obviously My Bloody Valentine and Terror Train and Humongous and other films that did. And I think the kind of average budget around, from what I could see, they were talking about a film called Death Bite, which I think it must have gone on to be Spasms. And they all had like a budget of 1.5 to 2 million. So this was very, very cheap. And as we said, it kind of gives it that kind of grimy film. So it's shot on 16 mils, we said, under the title Community Standards in December of 1981 in Toronto. And I've seen some, it's saying that the date of the film was 1982, so maybe some shooting into 1982. But the film wasn't released until 1983, a limited release to Canadian cinemas. And then I think it got a very brief cinema release in the United States in 1984. So it would have looked, given every time you think of the summer of 84 in the United States, it's kind of Dealey Boppers and Dayglow, isn't it? So this film would have been very much a kind of juxtaposition against that. Paul Lynch was originally interested in directing this film. I know there's if you do get a chance to pick up that disc, there is an interview with him on there, and he actually says that after Prom Night he was offered the chance at directing Terror Train. And he turned it down because it was too similar, although he went on to direct Humongous, which I'm not quite sure. That's not exactly the biggest move away from this. But he was interested, apparently, in directing American Nightmare, but he had too much on his plate. So he said he was attracted to a script by John Shepherd, who wrote the first draft in 24 hours, which is surprising, actually, given he said actually John Shepherd's also interviewed on the disc. And he said he was paid $3,000 to write it. And he actually joked, he said he was the highest paid crew member on the film. And he went on to work with Paul Lynch on a number of low-budget movies. And he said Lynch was inspired by Sidney Lumet's Clute, which was Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland, I think, is in that early 70s kind of thriller movie. But John Shepherd said that Paul Lynch, because he's an English, he was born in England and he kind of moved to Canada to make movies, and he said he had a fascination with like the dark underbelly of American life, and so I think that was part of the reason why, and obviously the saleability of the movie it certainly wouldn't have been alone to sort of try and pass itself off as an American movie. And as I mentioned before, he was actually hired. He'd say he had never heard of Jalli, and was surprised with the comparison, but he was hired by an Italian production company or filmmaker to write a thriller in Italy off the back of this. And one tidbit he said from the interview, he said that he was actually on set for much of this, and he said that Paul Lynch was a really good director for working with writers, where some directors don't want anything to do with writers and exclude them from the set. But he said he was on set for pretty much all of this. And he said some of the locations were as skeevy and horrible as they looked, including, he said, the hotel in the opening scene, which he said was just horrific. And he said he felt sad for the actors. The director, Don Mabretti, is it Mabretti? He started with a short film called Gale Strait, Is There a Choice? A documentary short in 1975. And now he's making Hallmark-style Christmas movies such as Boyfriends of Christmas Past. So that's he's had quite a career trajectory, hasn't he, really?
Boyfriends of Christmas Past sounds awesome.
Well, I looked. He seems everything. It's kind of like Boyfriends of Jingles or Jingle Bells or Boyfriends of I don't know Santa Sack or whatever it is.
That sounds even better.
I thought it would. So anyway, that's what he's making at the moment. But John Shepherd actually said that the director added in extended all the chase scenes to make them more suspenseful, and he thought that was a really good. It was he did a really good job with that. So because I think if without that actually adding those suspense things, the film may have felt wouldn't have worked as well as it does. Laura Stalley played Louise, who was the Erik squeeze. She was in Risky Business a little bit, and also Remington Steele around the time. Of course, she also gets naked and they all have kind of extended cabaret dance, sexy dance stripping sequences, which is a coincidence coming off the back of our drunk cast with Last Dance. So and Erik, Lawrence Day played Erik. He was in a few things, but didn't seem to go on. Didn't do much beyond the early 1990s. I was kind of surprised with Michael Ironside that his character really it just fizzles, doesn't it? He's not like you said, Erik. I think he's maybe just in it for name value, because of course he was also with Leonore Zan in a much bigger and much more well-known role in Visiting Hours as the killer in that. So with this, it just feels like he was brought in for a couple of days shooting for whatever reason, just to get some name value, perhaps. And I think that is about it. I don't think I've got anything else. So it is a film that is quite difficult to find much information on. But it kind of I think the one that was released, the one we've got on DVD, was from a 1-inch master, which I think isn't that a nickname that you're sometimes given, Erik?
12-inch master, I think you'll find.
But anyway, he was cut. Yeah, so I don't know if any film elements, because actually on the version I got, you can actually see there's a little bit of tracking problems. But apparently, it wasn't from a VHS release; it was actually from the 1-inch master, which is kind of the best they have. And I know sometimes some of these older films, and especially low budget movies, they're just aren't better elements, and sometimes all they can do is, when we talked about Hell Night last time and said about the release in that the original elements just don't exist anymore, so it's the best we're going to get. But I do agree, I think it adds a certain something to it. So anyway, I think that is all I have on American Nightmare. So Joseph, what was was there a consensus? Had many people seen it on the group?
Well, only 17 comments for this one, unfortunately. But from that, Joshua Grattan writes, excellent, ironically Canadian slasher. One of those films that actually benefits from only being available as a tape master. Gets better upon repeat viewings. Lenore Zahn's pitchfork stalking scene is perfect. And in a three-peat, we have, again, Ingo Dirk Schneider, who says, it never stops being super sleazy, which is quite a feat, but tries to cram too much into the story instead of just concentrating on the hunt for the serial killer. The acting changes from over the top to completely disinterested. Love Michael Ironside, but it's certainly not his most inspired performance. Silly fun, but not a film I will revisit often. Follow us, like us, and all that lovey-dovey stuff over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Listen on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and about 1 billion other podcatchers. If you like what you hear, consider joining us on Patreon, and we have a lot of cool stuff for our subscribers. For general questions or feedback, our email address is thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And also, I forgot to mention, of course, how could we forget to mention the topless juggling? I think that's the only time I've seen topless juggling in a slasher movie or any movie, actually.
She was talented.
She was talented,
She even did a split while doing the juggling. So I'm like, wow, you get it, girl.
I wonder if they got paid as much as the girls in Last Dance, because they should have.
Apparently, they were all real sort of strippers from the Toronto area at the time. Not all the actresses, but a lot. They're probably the ones talking about the mud wrestling at the beginning. I think they were all actually all sort of strippers working at the time, so to give that added authenticity. But yeah, who juggling and doing splits and doing topless? It's kind of it takes talent. So talking of talent, Erik.
It's my joke of the week. It's so bright and fantastic.
What's Michael Ironside's favorite type of music? Heavy metal.
Oh, that was good. I liked it.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have an auto generator on there, Erik?
That's so rude.
Well, that's one thumbs up, Erik.
Thank you. Daniela has something to say to you, Justin.
You whore! I hate you!
Well, thank you, Erik. I appreciate the sentiments.
And Magdalena has something to say.
You dirty nun fucker.
And I might actually, I've said, but I think before we came on air, I'm going to I'm home alone much of next week, so I may sort of dip into Magdalena, as it were. Is it kind of? Would you recommend it as a film that would be fun to watch with friends?
Yeah, I think so. It's also called The Devil's Female. That's its more anglicised title. And if you're a fan of the Famous Five from the late 70s, the ITV TV series, which I was, Uncle Quentin is in this.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hopefully I'll report back next time we record. So, excellent. Well, good stuff. Well, Erik, you have a little bit of feedback for us, don't you?
I do. And this is from Gary, and he says, "Greetings, gentlemen. I write to you for the first time, but have listened for about 6 years, give or take. I've also been a Patreon supporter for about 7 months, and if I may sing your praises, it is one of the best investments I've ever made." This is brilliant. I love this. When I caught up with all of your shows, it wasn't enough, so I had to join. So much variety, and you don't get on the main show. It's great. Anyway, I decided to write because I just completed listening to your latest Drunkcast. And, okay, at first it felt a little too subdued, though recently seen through... Sorry, let me start that again. Okay, at first it felt a little too subdued through recently seen, but there's a point right around the time you guys are halfway through your thoughts on Last Dance, which I thought was appallingly awful, by the way, but still loved, where you hear the gears switch on and Joseph becomes more surreal, Justin slurs his speech at an alarming rate, and Erik is desperately trying to be as hilariously snarky as possible, and yet poor Nathan is focused and seems like he's missing out on the fun. But then it hit me. What a brilliant reversal from last year's show. I guess I expected Nathan to go apeshit again, but the switcheroo this year was both weird and brilliant. Which, while I hope sloshy Nathan returns next year, I must compliment you guys on the side-splitting, non-sequiturs and side discussions. When my partner and I got to Justin's story about the dunes, we couldn't breathe. Oh yes, the dunes. Who could forget the dunes? Excuse me, I'm choking on my Pepsi. Maybe that's one of the things that makes your show so great, is that you sort of have expectations from familiarity, but you guys always find ways to throw the listener off track. I've rambled enough, but we'll just close out with this tidbit. I own 6 VHS copies of American Nightmare. Wow, that's quite a lot. All the best, Gary. Well, thank you, Gary. He must be a big fan of American Nightmare if he owns 6 copies on VHS.
And you had 4, didn't you, Joseph?
I had 3 or 4, I believe. Wow, he's got me beat there.
I picked one up in New York in about 1999 or something, but I haven't got it anymore. I think I sold it, but I used to have that. So
and mine wasn't because I was a huge fan. I just like collecting different artworks at the time. So maybe that's what he's doing.
Cool. And actually, I had the one sheet poster for it as well, which has that kind of creepy, that kind of surgical gloved hand and sort of going to grab the woman. So, well, thank you, Gary. Hopefully, I remember always made me laugh last year when someone that plea never to do another Drunkcast again, and we've done it. So, hope you enjoyed it, and hope you haven't turned too many people off. Hope you've turned a few people on. Well, not with the talks of Junes, I'm sure. But anyway.
yeah, the June story would probably, yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, this is going to be quite a short show, isn't it?
Yes.
Things come in small packages, don't they, Erik?
Not with me, they don't. If you know what I mean.
I don't. So, anyway, well, so what are we covering next time? I think, Erik, it is your choice, isn't it?
Yeah, well, as promised on the Drunkcast, we're going completely the opposite direction to American Nightmare. We're going for Beaches with Barbara Hershey and Bette Midler, that famous slasher movie from 1989.
Did you ever know that you're my hero?
No, actually, this might be a bit too similar to American Nightmare, but we're going with it anyway. So it's time for us to visit Don't Go in the House.
Excellent. So anyway, we're upping the laughs for the next episode.
Yep.
So, Don't Go Into the House. That'll be an interesting one to talk about. So, from the absurdities of Last Dance to the grimness of Don't Go in the House, although it has its fair shares of not light moments, but certainly
silly disco moments.
Disco moments, yes, indeed. So anyway, I'm gonna shock you all, and especially Erik. I'm not gonna play out with Susie and the Banshees.
Oh my God, what's gone wrong?
I'm gonna play out with the Creatures, Mr. Girl.
For fuck's sake.
So anyway, well, thank you for listening to this kind of slightly minier version of the Hysteria Continues, but hopefully we'll be back to full length next time. We'll catch you next time on the Hysteria Continues. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Kiss the girl.